Kia ora everyone, my name's Zach. I love rugby. Welcome back to Hakatime Rugby. Guys, the game is over and what a result. The Springboks down the hosts in Paris. Two fantastic results in Paris over the weekend. Old Hakatime Rugby with his predictions. I picked both of these results, guys. And this one equally lived up to the hype, albeit in different ways from the game last night. I would describe it as a shootout in the first half, and then it was a case of the Springboks starting to manage the game through to completion. The way they rotated the subs, the way they used different selections at different times in terms of substitutions. Obviously, there was a yellow card, which we'll get into, but through those rotation management is what I'll call it. And I really want to cover this in depth, which I'll do in a future video. South Africa really had the right personnel on the field at the right time. And I'll get into what I mean by that in sort of summary here, but, I will do a full video of this on the future. In the beginning, or prior to the match as part of my preview, I spoke a little bit about, the style of game that the Springboks are going to play in both the first half and when they roll the rotations. And I think the selections were perfect with Damian Willemse and obviously faster Manie Libbok, faster players there, because the first half was just a complete shootout. It was tit for tat. The ball was coming over, a lot. And there was a lot of work that needed to be done from the 15. And in particular, Manie Libbok had a great running game, I thought, as well. But in the early stages, Cyril Bai gets the first try. And that was just fantastic work from Dupont, sort of setting that up with his small kicks in behind the defense. So France were able to capitalize and get their first try. And then very shortly after, in the 8th minute, Kurtley Arendse scores his try. And that was on the back of a Dwayne Vermeulen turnover I saw there, which led to the breakaway and led to Kurtley Arendse's try. So very much early stages. It's a game that is high-paced. It's a game where the ball is flying backwards and forwards, rapidly. And it really suited those selections that the Springboks made, as I mentioned. Looking at some of the other key moments, we did see with the second try, Pateo Malvaka, that was built by Dupont going quickly off the penalty and able to give that over to Malvaka. So again, option taking from Dupont. Malvaka with his, just great athleticism, explosive power. He just seemed to pop up everywhere and always get over the gain line. So I thought he had a fantastic game. Interesting point, Cheslin Colby charges down the kick. And Ramos is a fantastic kicker, as we know, had great success in this game. But look at the score, 29-28. So perhaps taking that sort of laissez-faire, sort of slow approach to taking your kicks, maybe that's one he'll look back at and regret. I mean, it was a sideline kick, so, it may not have had an ultimate bearing on the game. But, 1 point difference, charge down conversion, that was a big, big moment. Probably the other thing I'll call out here is Manie Libbok. A lot has been made about his kicking, but he actually had a reasonable kicking game here, I thought. Certainly there was one touchline kick that he got. There was one sort of slightly more infield that he missed. But, probably under some other games that we've seen from him, you'd probably see him miss both of those kicks. So for him to get a couple of the kicks, I think he should be very proud of that. And I think ultimately he served his role in that first half, very much so. Now the second scrum, that came about the 35th minute mark. And at this stage, we're still in this, very much an arm wrestle, as I mentioned, tit-for-tat shootout style of game. But this is where we started to see the Springboks stamp their authority, and when we started to see it more in the Springboks mold, right? So we spoke as part of the preview about there being an evolution of the game in Springboks rugby, that they've got the options now, the tools at their disposal to play both fast with the younger guys, the faster selections, Libbok and Willemse, and then slow things down if they need to and manage the game out to a close with the likes of Andre Pollard and Willie Leroux. So this is the point where I noticed that from a forward perspective, they were really targeting in on winning and dominating that physical battle. Antonio seemed to tire at this point, and that scrum at this point was relatively even. But then shortly after, it was Willemse that took a mark and called for the scrum. And we very, very rarely see that option being taken. So it was interesting to see him take that option. And the result was a penalty, obviously out of the scrum there. So come halftime, it's, after Ramos scores another penalty, it's 22-19 at halftime. And, you're thinking at this point, it's a shootout game, it's a fast game. And I was expecting some of the forwards to really tire. So it became a question of, when the rotations are made, who is going to adjust best and who is able to manage fatigue enough to be present in that final 10 minutes. And that final 10 minutes was huge. Let's talk about the Eben Etzebeth yellow card. Fair yellow card, obviously. And him going down at that point. And it was a nice touch to see him just apologise. I think it was to Antonio for the collision. And that was just before halftime. So at that point, Ramos gets the penalty. It's 22-19. And the Springboks are in a position where they're down 10. Now, we saw the same thing for the All Blacks, right? The All Blacks had 2 yellow cards and were able to manage the game sufficiently to minimize the impact of those yellow cards. And in some ways, and this is something I really want to cover off with the rotation video that I do in depth, in some ways, it allows a cycle where a player that you might otherwise take off or try to manage minutes around actually gets a rest. So if you can manage that 10-minute period well, the benefit is you've got a rested player who can close out the game. And that was an important point going to the second half. Let's see, what else have we got? So penalties taken by France in the second half takes it up to 25-19. And then we see Oxenchak come in. Around about the 50th minute mark, the subs really started to get rolled, and Ox just dominates the scrum. And then we started to see a real presence from the Springboks forwards. You know, they were winning collisions. They were getting over the top, the high work rate. I do want to make a massive shout out to Jesse Creel for his line speed and to Damien Dialende for both his line speed, defensive work, and for just being ever present and dangerous with the ball in hand. And you know, there's been a lot of talk about who the best combination should be for the Springboks and whether or not it's Esterhausen and Moody. But I think these two proved why there has been so much faith in them, both on the defensive side, because you know, the line speed was so important to the errors that were caused by France. And it was a big part of, you know, the win here, I think, is that Dialende and Creel were putting pressure on immensely and were constantly getting a result from the French in terms of errors. A couple of other moments. Quagga Smith comes on. Again, another great rotation, energy player, and he gets a huge turnover. So, at this point, 53-meter bomb from Pollard in terms of a penalty. And it's just the Springboks are starting to pull away at this point. Colby goes for a cheeky drop goal. I thought it was a really interesting play from him. Why not? No one saw it coming. He had every opportunity to do it. We very rarely see a player just pick up and pop out like that in terms of the drop goal. So that was a great little innovation. And this is the thing about the Springboks. There's constantly these little, you know, different perspectives that are being added to Springbok rugby where, you know, Colby popping up, grabbing the ball, you think he's going to either spark the attack or run, and what does he do? He takes a drop goal. So that's obviously something they've spoken about, they've worked on, and a great little piece of innovation. To close out the game, Pieter-Steph du Toit comes on after HIA, and what a luxury it is to have someone like Dion Fourie, right? And I'll get to rotation management, as I say, guys, because I think it was a massive part to the winning of this game, but the strategy in terms of the selections at the beginning, the rotation of the players in the end, and having the likes of Dion Fourie, who can cover both sides. And it was needed because at this point when Pieter-Steph du Toit came on, Bongi and Benami had to come off. So you got Dion Fourie can just slot into hooker. You've got the presence, the pace, the athleticism of Pieter-Steph du Toit back on the track. And, you know, with that, the Springboks were able to close out the game. Fantastic result. Southern Hemisphere seems to be on fire at the moment. Guys, 3 of the 4 quarterfinals won by Southern Hemisphere teams. And with the results in pool play, obviously there'll be a lot of questions asked from a Northern Hemisphere perspective. There was certainly a lot of confidence going into these quarterfinals from Northern Hemisphere teams and fans. And overall, we're treated to fantastic rugby. So we should probably look at it that way. But what it does show is that winning in pool play is not the be-all and end-all. That you have to know how to manage tournaments if you want to get past the knockout style, sections of the tournament. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to do a couple of more videos this week, guys. I want to do rotation management so that we can really drill in and lock in on some of the, what I thought were just genius calls by both Ian Foster and Jacques Nienaber in this one. The way that they rotated their team, the way that they managed the yellow cards, and the way that they had the right people on the field at the right time to manage these games to a close is huge. It's something we haven't seen at this level, and it's great to see it from these two brilliant heavyweight sides. I'm going to leave it there, guys. I'll be back soon. Enjoy.